All right, good evening, everyone. This video is a special edition of Weather for Weather Geeks. This is going to be the winter forecast Weather Geek version. I'm doing this video a day before the winter forecast is shown on TV because I love you guys. Love the Weather Geeks out there who are loyal viewers and followers of me on social media. And so to kind of give you guys a one-day jump on everybody else, we're going to do this more in-depth version of the forecast this evening. This will be a long video, so hang in there. I hope you'll find it to be worth your time. All right, so we're going to talk about winter 2015-2016, and we're going to focus on the 3 months of meteorological winter, December, January, and February. Of course, it can snow in November, and it can snow in March, and even some years in April, but the heart of winter, those 3 months of meteorological winter, December, January, and into February as well. All right, if you're a regular viewer of this video, then chances are you don't put much faith in the Farmer's Almanac, but just my yearly rant about the Farmer's Almanac and their seasonal forecasts. So, their winter forecast came out in July or something. The Farmer's Almanac, great book for a lot of things, facts and figures, astronomical data, tips on planting, and all sorts of good stuff. It's a great read. What it isn't great for is weather forecasts. It's total science fiction. It's for entertainment purposes only. But there's a lot of people out there that take the Farmer's Almanac forecast pretty seriously. But I hope that you are not among them. All right, the last two winters. Bill Murray said it best in Groundhog Day. This winter is never going to end. That's the way we felt last winter and the winter before. We've had two winters in a row, and it kind of a back-to-back double whammy that we haven't seen since the 70s in our part of the country. We're hoping that this year will not make it three in a row, and we're going to show you why we think that will not be the case, why we do think this year will bring some relief. First, a quick review of last year. Interestingly enough, it's hard to remember this considering how bad it got, but December was a warm and snow-free month. We had less than an inch of snow at the airport last December. We had temperatures for the month, 4.3 degrees above average. So it was a pretty balmy start to meteorological winter last year, and a lot of people kind of wrote off winter, saying, this year's going to be easy, no problem. Well, of course, the tide turned during the second half of the winter. Once we got past the first few days of January, the pattern really locked into a cold and at times snowy one, and this did, of course, include the coldest February on record in Youngstown with a whopping 14 degrees below average. That number is just astounding. That for a month, a 30-day period, or in February's case, a 28-day period, to have a minus 14 in the departure from average is just pretty remarkable. And when you factor all 3 months together, it was the sixth coldest winter on record in Youngstown. Of course, if December hadn't been so warm, this probably would have been a top 2 or 3 winter as far as record cold in Youngstown. All right, this list is totally subjective. But here's a list I put together of the top 10 harshest winters of the last 40 when you factor in how much snow fell and the temperature departures. Again, totally kind of subjective to, when it comes to this list. You could make your own order, and I couldn't probably argue with it too much. But I do put the winter of 2011-2012 as number one because look at the snow, 119 inches, and the temperatures that winter, minus 3.5 on the departure from average. Then, 2 winters ago, 90 inches and a minus 4.4 in the temperature department. I put that winter ahead of last year because we didn't have quite as much snow last year and December was so warm. So 2014-2015 in my list is in 5th place. Minus 4.6 was our temperature departure from average last winter. We're hoping not to make the top 10 list this year. All right, how do we do on the forecast last year? This is a seasonal forecast, and a lot of people say, a lot of people when they're being snarky about weather people, meteorologists, they don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. How do they know what's going to happen over the winter? Well, there is science to this, and a lot of years forecasts are okay or not so okay. Some years they turn out really well, and it depends on the large-scale patterns across the U.S. and the world. When you have a strong El Niño, as we have this year, your confidence tends to be a little bit higher in the forecast. Anyway, last year, this is what our forecast was. We issued this right around Halloween, and here's what happened. Pretty good forecast. It was warm out west. It was cold in the east, and that's exactly, pretty similar anyway, to what our map looked like. Our forecast for our winter here last year was for minus 3. Remember that we ended up with minus 4.6. So we weren't cold enough, and that's because who would have thought that February would be so off the charts cold? So last year, warm in the west, cold in the east. Here's how much snow fell, at least in the Cleveland Weather Service area of jurisdiction. Notice Columbiana County, Mercer County, Lawrence County, not included on this map because this is a map issued by the Cleveland National Weather Service office. A lot of Mahoning County ended up 45 to 50 to 55 inches. Once you get up into Trumbull County, at the airport, the number ended up being 79. Average at the airport in Vienna is 60 for a season. So we were about 19 inches above average at the airport, and that's pretty representative of the region as a whole. Last year, we got anywhere between, say, 10 and 20 to 25 inches more snow than we typically do. So that's what the map looked like last year. Of course, the numbers get higher as you get closer to the lake effect areas. Our viewing area does not include the primary snow belt, which runs right through here, but a secondary snow belt is generally considered to include the northern, say, third of Trumbull County. All right, this year, we have a strong El Nino, as you know. What is El Nino? Just a quick reminder. El Nino is a pool of warmer than average water temperatures that exists in the central and especially eastern part of the Pacific Ocean as you get up to the latitude of northern South America. El Nino is not a storm. El Nino is not something you can track on the satellite. When you see the national networks and other, jabronis out there saying, well, El Nino's coming to California. Well, no, that's not how it works. El Nino doesn't come somewhere. El Nino influences weather patterns, but it's not something, again, that you can track and point to a satellite and say, oh, look, there's El Nino. Here's a look at the current, or at least as of yesterday, the sea surface temperature anomalies across the Pacific. Anomaly meaning difference from average. Here you have your warm pool of water. Pretty classic El Nino look to things here. Notice that the core of the warmest water, at least compared to average, is not quite up against South America. It's a little more to the west. The placement of that warm water, the warmest water anyway, is important. That has impacts on what El Nino does to the weather patterns. And I'll talk about that a little more in just a second. Also of note on this map, you have an area of very warm water off the coast of North America. You have warm water off the coast of the northeastern U.S., and then you have a cold pool up in the northern Atlantic Ocean. Talk about those situations a little more in just a bit. Here's a look at El Ninos and La Ninas going back to 1950. The list of very strong El Ninos, there's only two of them, 1982, 1997. We had three strong and then several what we call moderate El Ninos. The stronger the El Nino, or on the flip side of things, La Nina, the stronger it is, the more impact it has on weather patterns, and the more kind of easily predictable, I should say, the influences will be. When you have a weak El Nino, and there's a lot of those on the list, when you have a weak one, the winter season could go either way. Typically, weak El Ninos or weak La Ninas don't impact the pattern quite as strongly and make things harder to predict. Here's just another view of the La Ninas and El Ninos. When you get to above this line right here, these are El Ninos. These are La Ninas below the line. Last year, which wasn't included on the previous slide, last year we had a moderate El Nino with the warmest water based pretty far west. And when that warm water is based pretty far to the west, kind of more out here than over here, typically that allows colder air to infiltrate the U.S. This year, the core of the warmest water probably will be farther east. So even though last year was a moderate El Nino, we still had a cold winter due to the placement of that water and several other factors as well. All right, so what does El Nino do to the jet stream? Typically, this is what happens. The subtropical jet, which is typically way off to the south, off our map even, comes north and starts to get into the southern U.S. That tends to drive moisture into California, Arizona, Texas, heading over to Florida as well. The northern branch of the jet tends to go farther north than in a typical winter, and that usually keeps the cold air bottled up for a lot of the winter. Not the entire winter, but a lot of the winter up into Canada. So that's a typical setup in a strong El Nino. But it's important to note that not all El Ninos are alike, even strong ones. This temperature anomaly map is for the winter of 1957-1958. It was a pretty strong El Nino that year. Notice it was a little colder than average that winter in the east, and it was warm in the west. Compare that with the strongest El Nino on record, 97-98. It was a non-winter basically where we live. We have very little snow compared to average, and we have very warm temperatures. So not all El Niños are alike. Sometimes they can produce drastically different results. In what we call our analog winters, in other words, the winters that have the most or bear the most resemblance to the setup this year, both in what's going on with the atmosphere and the oceans. So this is the list. These are the years that are most similar to this year, it looks like. Here's a look at the temperature departures from average. What happened those winters? Notice there's variance here. In 1957-58, which is probably our top analog, it was actually a little colder than average that winter. But in the two strongest El Niños on record, 82-83 and 97-98, look how warm it was. +6 for the temperature departures those winters. This year could rival those years as far as the strength of El Niño. So we have to take those years into consideration. It's not off the table that we have a similar winter. That's not our forecast. I'll show you the forecast in a minute, but it's possible that we have the type of warmth that we had in 82-83 and 97-98. As far as snow, again, there's a variance, but out of our 6 years, 4 of these years had below average snowfall. Again, average at the airport's about 60 inches. So 87-88 and last year, 2014-2015, had above average. The other 4 years were below average. So odds definitely, when you look back at history, start tilting towards the idea of a below average winter as far as snow. Now, when you throw all those years in a hopper and come up with an average, when you consider all 6 years, here's what the map looks like for the U.S. Warm across the north, cool across the south. That's what, when you average them all together. As far as precipitation, when you average those 6 winters together, you get a drier than average pattern. Tennessee Valley, Ohio Valley, wet in California, wet in Florida, kind of wet down near the Gulf Coast. So that's what it looks like when you look at all 6 years. Now, when you have an El Niño, especially a strong one, it's not warm every day of the winter. How's it going to get cold? Well, the key may be what's going on in the Atlantic Ocean. I showed you earlier that warm pool of water off the northeast coast of the U.S. and into Atlantic Canada. That is there, and then there's cold water up across the northern Atlantic. And these water temperatures can influence the atmosphere, can influence the jet stream, and they can cause a ridge to pop up along the east coast or just to the east of the eastern seaboard of the U.S. And that's when that ridge is over there, that tends to allow a trough to form over the Great Lakes, and then the Arctic air can come down. So this is the type of setup that will allow some Arctic air to come down this winter. And make no mistake, there will be cold days this winter. There will be snow at times, but it may not be as frequent as recent years. All right, I'm up over 12 minutes already. Better get going here. All right, we're going to break this down month by month. Here's the December forecast, and our highest degree of confidence in the winter is in December. We're almost dead certain December is going to be a warm month compared to average. In just about every strong El Niño, December is warm. So this is our forecast. Could be a +3, maybe even close to +4 temperature anomaly in December. That would reduce, of course, the chances of a white Christmas. Now, by January, you start to see in a lot of strong El Niño winters more and more Arctic air getting involved and being able to fight off El Niño a little bit. And so our forecast for January is just a ho-hum typical January. No strong signal that it'll go warm or colder than average. So again, the northern tier, pretty sure that's going to be warm. It's probably going to be chilly compared to average down near the Gulf Coast, but where we live right now, we think it will kind of turn into just a typical January. It'll snow some, it'll be cold some days it'll be somewhat mild. Now, compared to the averages, we do think that February will be the coldest month of the winter. Remember, last February, -14 was the temperature departure. This year, -1. So while it may be colder than average, it should be quite a bit more tolerable. And that's the theme overall this winter. Just a much more tolerable winter. But again, colder air masses will become a little more frequent, will be allowed to come south as you go into the second half of the winter. So when you look at all 3 months then, combined, December, January, and February, this is the map that you come up with. Our forecast for the winter in Youngstown, in our entire viewing area, is for the temperature departure to be about a +1. Remember, last year was about -4.5, so we expect this year to be about 5.5 degrees warmer than last year. So that should be a noticeable change. I think a lot of us will be relieved. Our utility bills will certainly be a lot better this year. Quickly, the snow forecast. We've given ranges here. So in the southern, say, third of our viewing area, say south of 224, 25 to 35 inches. Of course, the amounts get higher as you go to the north, but all of these amounts are below average for your location. So if you live in Greenville or you live in Sharon, while you might see 55 inches of snow, that's still below average. If you live in Boardman, 25 to 35 is the forecast. Average in Boardman is probably in the 40s, something like that. We don't have hard figures, but something like that. So it's going to snow some this winter, but probably not as much as the last couple of winters. So the bottom line, much more tolerable winter. Most consistent cold to be is likely to be in February. Snow should be below average for the first time since 2011-2012. That was the last time we had a below average winter. Now, one thing we want to mention here is that while we might have less snow, sometimes in El Nino winters, and this happened in 97, 98, you get more ice events as the air just isn't quite cold enough for all snow, but you get some sleet and freezing rain. So we're going to have to watch out for that possibility, especially as we get into the second half of winter, that we could be dealing with more ice setups as opposed to snow compared to the last couple of years. I will touch briefly on weather apps. Our WFMJ weather app, I know everybody's been asking about it, and I've been, patiently awaiting it as well. It'll be coming out soon. It's going to be a lot better than a lot of the garbage weather apps that a lot of people use on their phones, including just the stock app that comes with the phone. Most of those forecasts are computer generated. That computer is basing it on one computer model. When I make your forecast, I look at 8 or 9 computer models. Some have some human input, some do not. Since there's such a small amount of real estate on your phone, there's not a lot of room for detail. That's why you have videos like this, and that's why our app will be better. We're going to squeeze in more detail into a smaller space. So looking forward to debuting that soon. Thanks for watching the online version of the winter forecast. Again, shorter version, a little more succinct and a little less geeky, will be on 21 News at 11. Coming up Thursday night, October the 29th. Thanks as always for watching, and have a great night.